some participants to admit as well, so let me get them in. There's another 10 people waiting to come in. Yeah, okay. Well, what happened there, I don't know. But anyway, we've got Melissa, and she's ready to go. Over to you, Melissa.
That's okay. It happens all the time, even at space conferences, anywhere I am in the world. There's always some sort of technical glitch. So even at the height of the space industry, there's always something that goes wrong with tech. Yeah. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I'm Melissa Thorpe. I'm the current head of Spaceport Cornwall. And I'm just going to give you a bit of an insight into what we're doing down here in Cornwall regarding the UK's first satellite launch facility that's due to launch early next year, and really just give you an overview of what our activities are. I will definitely touch on some of the topics that I spoke about on Countryfile last night. And I'd like to just leave quite a bit of time at the end for questions, because that tends to be where the great bits of conversation come from. So I will share my screen now, hopefully, and just do about 35 minutes of a overview, and then leave some time for questions.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, and should be able to see. Can you see that? I'll start. So I'll just go in. I'll just give you a bit of an insight to who I am, because I think probably my accent throws most people off of where I've come from, and how I got to this position in Cornwall. So I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Canada, a really tiny rural town, kind of in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And it was really just about, a childhood which was pretty stereotypical small town Canada. My mum was a park ranger. My dad fought forest fires using water bombers. So, the town itself was mainly around forestry and agriculture and ranching, quite traditional. But I grew up with these massive, amazing night skies with no light pollution and, northern lights and just all the magic that we could see from that place in Canada, and meteor showers and, probably a lot of the things that you guys talk about here. And it really just inspired me. As a really young girl, I just wondered what was out there, as I'm sure most of us do. And I did want to go into astronomy when I was younger. But unfortunately, at the time, there wasn't really anybody doing it where I lived. In school, saying that's what you wanted to do, they were like, well, there's not really a future of it in it for you here. So I actually ended up going into economics. I did do STEM subjects at school, and that led to me kind of into economics, doing a degree in Vancouver, because I was really interested in how, marketplaces around the world worked and could create economic development in really rural areas. So I saw, growing up in a small town, as companies came in or maybe left, the impact that had on the entire community. And I really thought that was quite interesting. So I focused on that. Absolutely loved doing my degree. And then I moved over to the London School of Economics, which was my dream school, as most economic students would feel. And I did my master's in economics as well. And then after I graduated in London, I came down to Cornwall. My grandmother was actually from here, and she used to talk to me about this magical place called Cornwall when I was little. And so when I graduated, rather going into the city, I thought, I'll give myself a few months to see if I can find anything. And actually, I was brought in by Cornwall Council, who had just purchased the airport, Cornwall Airport, Newquay, from the MOD. And we're transitioning it to this civilian airport, but also looking at different ways of generating revenue and income for the site. So I was brought in as basically a consultant, and this was 11 years ago now. And because my economics degree and master's, I focused on aerospace and aviation industries, and how the likes of Boeing and Airbus, where they set up around the world, their different policies and how they engaged with communities and created jobs, was really interesting to see the different dynamics and what worked and what didn't. So that's exactly what I was doing at the airport when I first came down to Cornwall, was looking at different kinds of technologies that we could use, this amazing asset that we have here, to kind of bring and attract business to the sites to help generate revenue for the airport. So that's what led me into Spaceport. I was working at the airport, and in 2014, which I'll talk about in a minute, we were shortlisted as a spaceport. And that was kind of, the rest was a long sordid history of the last 7 years of this journey. So I have been part of the team since its beginning. I started out doing the kind of investment raising, bid writing, government lobbying, some of the kind of engagements and marketing and it just gaining support for the project and then the investment we needed. And that led me, was featured in the New York Times in October last year, because I think what you'll hopefully find from my presentation is my outlook and my beliefs behind how important space is, but also how important something like a spaceport is to a rural economy. Hopefully it's quite different. This isn't a big corporation coming in to take advantage of something. This is, people that live and breathe and love Cornwall, wanting to do something that will make Cornwall proud. So I took on this role. So my predecessor, Miles, we worked together for about 10 years, and he just left at the end of last year to go and head up Falmouth, the Port of Falmouth. And I've stepped into his shoes in the interim, but hopefully that will become a bit more permanent, because I absolutely love what I do. So I'm just gonna go right into it. As probably you know, or if not, you've read about, space and the industry of space is really changing. So it's moving away from this quite commercial, state-led, government-led programs and it's commercializing. And what you're getting is a lot of entrepreneurs, private individuals and companies that are trying to benefit from space. So they see opportunities in space and a market that they can access. And so you're starting to see this commercialization of space into what we call in the industry new space. So these new entrants, not necessarily traditional space businesses, all coming in, and entrepreneurs that are diversifying into the space industry. So Elon Musk with SpaceX, and Jeff Bezos from Amazon with Blue Origin, and Richard Branson with Virgin, who we're working with. And this is totally changing the dynamic of space. It's changing, being an economist, the demand and supply of what's out there in the space industry. Because what all these entrepreneurs and new businesses need is access to space, to get their products into space or to take products out of space and bring them back to Earth. So access to space is becoming incredibly important. And they're demanding different access to space. They're demanding access that is cheaper, more reliable, dedicated access to space that they can access much more easily than ever before. And so this demand is really pushing this kind of phenomenon around the world, which is the birth of commercial spaceports. So spaceports now looking to supply that access to space from places that not necessarily would have ever thought they would be able to do it. Hence Cornwall is on that list. And really, it's just all about this graph. Sorry, you don't need to read the detail because it's tiny and I can barely see it. But it's just to show visually that the top graph there is to show all the launches over the last 50 years, starting with Sputnik, that have been government funded and state launched. And then the bottom graph there, so over the last couple of decades, you're starting to see this really big growth in commercial launches. And that we're almost into the next decade, we can add to this, and it's even more so. SpaceX seems to be launching every week now. So this is just to show, and the whole reason for this is that entrepreneurialism and new businesses and the size of satellites. So satellites are decreasing in size. And also humans' hunger for satellite technology and space technology. Every single one of us uses space every single day, from the minute we pick up our phones, use GPS, use our internet, use a bank machine. It's a lot of our food now, agriculture. So much of it is derived from satellite applications. And this is just, again, pushing this demand to get those satellites up into space. They're smaller now. They don't need those massive heavy lift rockets, which means that spaceports that are launching don't have to be the traditional launch pad in the middle of French Guiana now. So there's a lot of kind of things at play here, but really the main message is satellites are becoming smaller. Humans are, driving the need for more satellites. Entrepreneurs with money recognize this, and they all want access to space. And that's where the UK comes in. So a large majority of the world's small satellites at the minute are actually built in the UK. I think not a lot of people realize that. It's quite a heavy hitter in satellite manufacturing. At the moment, all the satellites are shipped overseas. So they go to places like Kazakhstan or Russia or the US. And they tend to sit on, they piggyback or they lift share on a heavy lift rocket. So they share with lots of other payloads or other satellites. And often they get bumped off of those launches. And they have to wait. And so the shipping and the storage and the potential delays, it's not perfect for a UK satellite manufacturer. The UK government in around 2010, 2012 decided they wanted to capture 10% of the global space marketplace by 2030. So they put this target. And what that meant was part of that, to do that, was to get a launch in the UK, a launch site, so a sovereign launch capability in the UK. That could mean that those satellites that are being designed and built here can actually launch from here. So just down the road, rather than being shipped, they can launch them from here. And that was one way that they thought we could capture this kind of 10%. So at the minute, we're just under, I think we're about 6% now. So we're getting closer, but as launch comes in and we recognize, other stuff that the government's doing to help kind of facilitate that 10%, we're moving in the right direction. So the UK developed this Launch UK program. The UK did launch Black Arrow back in almost 50 years, just over 50 years ago from Australia, but we've actually never launched anything on UK soil in the UK. And that program's actually scrapped after the first launch. So this is really a refresh and a restart at launch. So these were the original sites that they shortlisted back in 2014. And there are 8 sites around the UK. And you can see the different icons there. Some of them are the traditional looking rocket vertical launch, as we call it. And the rest are airplanes, and that's called air launch. So it's basically using a modified airplane or aircraft of some sort to take a rocket using a runway to altitude and deploy the rocket midair. And that's what we are down here in Cornwall in Newquay. So these were the original sites they shortlisted. They did a desk-based exercise really with this. They just looked at things like runway length and low residential buildup, access to the sea, quite safe and low risk areas. So that's how this map was drawn up, and we were on the list, and they said, congratulations, we've been shortlisted as a spaceport. I'm not joking, that was pretty much the email. And we went, right, okay, well, what does that mean? And that meant that what they didn't want was a bill that they will come. They didn't want a Spaceport America, which cost hundreds of millions and then had to wait around for an operator. What they wanted for us to do is all these sites to go up to the marketplace, the launch marketplace, and see what systems were out there that could use our facilities. And so that's what we did. We went out and, well, actually, we didn't really have to go out. There's several companies that came straight to us and were keen to look at how they could launch in the UK and really access that customer base, those satellites. So we went forward with our partnership, which was successful, and this is it. Our consortium is basically made up of Cornwall Airport Newquay as the asset, I call it the bus stop, let's just say, which is owned by Cornwall Council still. Virgin Orbit, and that's Richard Branson's satellite launch company. He has one called Virgin Galactic. That's his human spaceflight company. So we're just working with Virgin Orbit. And they're based out in Long Beach in California. And basically the system, as you can see there, is an airplane. It's a modified Boeing 747 that has a 70-foot 2-stage rocket under one of its wings. And it will use our runway, to take off and to deploy that rocket midair. And then Goon Hill Air Station, which I'm sure many of you will know of, just down the road here. And they are our mission operations and tracking partner. So they are very much involved in what we're doing. And also they have the amazing data center facilities down there as well. So the satellites, once they get to space, will be able to retrieve the data from them back into Cornwall. So it's creating this consortium. So that's what we pitched to government. And we were successful with that. And then, we raised funding to ensure that we could do it. So our entire launch program to get to launch is just under £20 million, which I know is a lot of money, but at the end of the day, actually to create a space launch, it's a drop in the ocean. Launch and space are very expensive. So the reason we're able to do that for actually quite a cheap price is because we're using an existing airport, basically an existing launch system and existing asset down at Goonhilly. So we're basically, upcycling what we already have. And that's a new way of doing it. It definitely is. And I think really, we think it's the future. So a country that might want to launch, to be able to use an airport to do it is quite an interesting business model. So that 20 million is basically funded from UK Space Agency, Cornwall Council, Virgin Orbit, and Goonhilly. So we've all put in pots of cash into that mix, and we're now, I would say that was kind of the first chapter, which took about 6 years to get to, is that securing the funding and this partnership. And now I would say from January, we're fully into delivery, because we are to launch next year. So we're fully moving into actually spending that money now to get to launch. This is our airport. So as I said, it was bought from the MOD. It's one of the longest runways in the UK, and it has loads of space for development. But the beauty of what we're doing with Virgin is it's not going to look much different than this. We're able to create this launch from not a lot of spent money on infrastructure. We are doing a few bits, which I'll talk through in a moment. But we could actually, with that Virgin system and this airport, we could launch tomorrow. If we needed to do a one-off, we just really need the licensing and regulations that are going through Parliament at the minute. So it's a very capable airport. And I think, what's really exciting about what we're doing is we're integrating space launch into an operational airport. So this airport, before the pandemic, was the fastest growing airport, regional airport in the UK. We had, it was just a hive of activity, flights to all over the place. And we had military operations, search and rescue. We had maintenance, repair and overhaul. We had lots of different flying training. So full integration of space launch into that is incredibly exciting, because, it's a way of reusing something, like I said, but also inspiring the future. So if you're able to land on your flight from London Gatwick into Newquay and then look out your window and look to see a 747 about to launch to space, that's incredibly powerful, because it's on, it's accessible. And also it's a new way of doing it. So head of air traffic control at our airport is just, it's just another air traffic movement. It's a 747. We've handled them in the past. We know how to handle them. So it's full integration. The airport will not shut. It will continue operations, and we're just fully integrating it into the airport. So we're quite different from the other sites in Scotland, which are vertical launch and doing almost a bespoke purpose-built facility, which you probably would have seen in the Country File episode, because there's a lot of questions about that. Whereas there's hardly any impact that we're doing to the site itself. That's the system. So they launched for the first time ever out in California in January. And what it did, took off from Mojave Air and Spaceport, went out up to about 35,000 feet, dropped the rocket, which is called Launcher One there. The rocket ignited and went up and delivered 11 NASA scientific payloads to lower Earth orbit. So that's exactly what it'll do from Cornwall. It's a 2-stage rocket. It fits between 300 and 500 kilograms of payload in it. So anything from a bunch of CubeSats to the size of a fridge freezer satellite, larger spacecraft. And they're just looking at lower Earth orbit. And what their business model and how it's slightly different than what you'll see from others is they're a mobile launch platform. So because it's an aircraft, it can go anywhere in the world to launch as long as there's a licensed spaceport. So they're going to have hubs all around the world. So rather than satellites coming to them, they're going to actually come to where the satellites are. So they have their home out in California. We're going to be their first site out of the UK here in Cornwall, and we're actually going to be their European hub. So they're going to cater for all the satellite companies, not only in UK, but Europe as well. They have other sites in Japan, Guam, Australia. They just announced Brazil last week. So they're going to have a network of spaceports around the world that through the year, they're going to move around to. The reason they can do that is this is actually all they need to launch. This is their infrastructure. So it's not a futuristic looking terminal. It's this with all those lorries along the side there. That's their transportable ground operations systems. And that provides them everything they need to launch. Their fueling, mission ops, avionics, everything that they need are in those lorries there. what we're doing in the UK is we're actually procuring all that, those lorries and equipment, because they are very high tech, and we want to grow the capacity in the UK. So all of that's being built and jobs created all here in the UK, and that will be housed at our spaceport. And basically, the system, the aircraft will come in, land, will fit in all the ground operation systems, and get the rocket fueled up, and she'll be able to take off, and we'll keep the rest of it here. So it's building that capacity in the UK. We're looking at one launch the first year, and then a couple the next, and growing as the market grows. This is all about really high quality launches rather than quantity. But once we kind of get around 5 to 6, 7 launches a year, we'll be looking at basing a system like this. So having our own in the UK for servicing Europe. And that's just as the satellite market continues to grow. So it's a sustainable model. So this is it, and it's very different, I'm sure, than you would think. And I think what Country File, kind of put forward last night was a lot of really noisy vertical lift rockets, and that's not what we're doing at all here. So it is quite different. This is the opportunity. Don't read this all. It's just a kind of a visual showcase of all the things that we're looking into, of how this system is going to do all of this. So we're looking at jobs, 150 new jobs in Cornwall, in a high-tech, highly skilled, well-paid industry. In a place like Cornwall, that's still one of the most deprived places in all of Europe. That's massive, especially after a pandemic. And, an economy down here that's based on traditional sectors and hospitality. This is a big, big deal for Cornwall. 150 jobs in space is a big deal. And we're already recruiting now. We've started that process. And then there's other figures in there. It's just to show that this isn't just about those jobs. We're looking at some of these other things, which I'm going to talk about now, that actually the launch and how exciting that is. But it's what it means for Cornwall, what it means for the Southwest, and what it means for the UK, and how we actually capitalize on all that and capture that. So it's not just about Virgin coming in, launching, and going away again, and then we wait around and twiddle our thumbs until the next one comes. This is really about building a whole cluster based around this amazing opportunity, which is to launch to space from somewhere like Cornwall. So I just mentioned those 150 jobs. Those are really going to come immediately from the operations with Virgin, but we also have some other things going on down here. So we have other pieces of assets around the airport itself. We have these old hardened aircraft shelters from the Cold War that we're actually using for rocket testing and engine testing, and we've kind of repurposed those. This map here just shows all the businesses. So there's over 55 in Cornwall that are working in the space industry right now, and I think that's quite surprising for people. But when we say space industry, it's not just, launching or Goonhilly or Vanti Communications. It's more about companies that are using space and applications and data to run their business. They are a space business now. So we have amazing companies down here using satellite imagery, Earth observation, all these things, even, mining. And all we want to do as part of, developing this amazing opportunity of launch here is just act as a catalyst to just draw attention, draw investment, draw skilled labor, all these things down into Cornwall, so we can help grow all of this. It's not just about the spaceport, it's about getting the kind of right people and kit and businesses into a place like Cornwall to really help all of these businesses lift. So my passion is how we use space for good, how we launch for good. So this image here went viral in beginning of the very first lockdown, and it was Italy before they went to the first lockdown and during the lockdown, and it shows in, very picture paints about 1,000 words. These are the carbon emissions that were captured by satellite imagery, and it shows, the impact that humans obviously have on the environment. And what this did was actually inform policymakers in places like Venice, for instance, that used this image to go, oh, okay, we need to change. And the pressure from the public when they see these images. And actually, they've changed their tourism policies to be more sustainable in Venice because of a single image from space. And But the irony is, and I could go on and on, it's a whole other session probably on all that satellites are doing to help fight climate change and, make really polluting sectors more efficient. So whether that's driverless tractors in agriculture or in healthcare or, even on-road transport and emergency services, satellites are just benefiting life on Earth every single day. The irony comes from actually how all that amazing technology gets into space. It's getting there in not a very good way. So, for instance, this image was taken by Sentinel-5 Copernicus program, so a satellite that was actually built in the UK. It was shipped over to Russia to launch off an ex-ballistic missile. Trying to find anything out about that launch, what were their carbon emissions from it? Do they do community engagement programs? What are the kinds of jobs they've created there is pretty much impossible. And I think that's where the irony comes. We're doing all this great stuff in space, but the way it's getting there is just not right. And I think space has enjoyed a level of secrecy over the years where people just haven't asked these questions. But because we're partly public funded, we're in a small community like Cornwall, what you saw on Countryfile last night, people are asking these questions. So, okay, so you're going to launch. So Cornwall Council, for instance, invested in the spaceport at the same time that they declared a climate emergency. And a lot of people just didn't understand how you could support a spaceport and declare a climate emergency. But really, the council's like, well, we want the technology we're launching from Cornwall to go up and actually be beneficial to the fight against climate change. And the balance then will be, for the little amount that we will be having an impact, it will go on to do much better things. So our goal as a team now is to be the most sustainable launch location in the world. And that's something you can just, obviously I can just say that to you and you probably wouldn't even know what, that meant. But for me, that's not good enough. We need to back up what that claim is. We have to be net zero by 2030. How do we reach that? Well, it's not just about offsetting or mitigating against our launches. It's looking at how do we decrease the impact of those launches altogether? How do we get the technology, biofuels, anything like that we can use to get that impact down? So we did a carbon impact report last year, 2 years ago, and at the height of our launches, so if we get to 8 launches a year, let's say, we're looking at about 0.1% more emissions in Cornwall because of our activities. That's a really low amount, but it's still an impact. And like I said, my team, we're all, live here. We all love it. We love the, my background from the first picture I showed you of where I grew up in Canada. Like, we're not happy with any impact. Of course we're not. So we're working really hard on what that looks like. So we'll be the first spaceport to have a open and transparent carbon impact assessment that we're updating every year. We're releasing our sustainability action plan for G7, which we'll update every year. We'll have an ethical framework. We're the only spaceport anywhere in the world with that. So what are we launching it? How are we launching it? What's it going to do after it's launched? What about space debris? So we're considering all of this, and when I say we want Cornwall to be proud of what we're doing, it's also how we're launching. So launching more responsibly into space. And we're quite well ahead just because we're already operational as an airport and it's airplane. So we're actually, we aren't that peat bog in Scotland, which has a lot more further to go. So to create that launch, to get that amazing technology up into space, which is amazing, but we need to do it as responsibly as we possibly can. So that was just my point on that. And then challenge everybody else to start to do the same, because a lot of people are not doing it like that. My other passion is exciting children about space. This graph here just is a quick one to show the uptake of STEM subjects during the Apollo moon missions. And NASA at the time didn't have any sort of official outreach program. They didn't go into schools and get kids excited. It was just beat the Russians to the moon. But what they saw was kids were inspired anyways. A whole generation of children wanted to go to the moon. And this is exactly what we want to do down here and across the UK. So for us to go into a very, very, deprived area of Redruth, for instance, and I go into schools there and tell them about, who here likes space, and they all love space. And I said, it's going to be on your doorstep. You're going to be able to come and watch that. Plus, we are going to help you with the pathway into space. Now, it's not just about getting them excited, it's showing them how they then go through our local college down here is now starting to offer spacecraft operations courses. And also it's about saying, look, you don't have to be an astronaut anymore. You don't have to be an astrophysicist. You can actually look about how you grow food on the moon or Mars, or how you do marketing in space, or even in Space Command or Space Force. Like, there's so many, it crosses everything now. And it's trying to introduce them to all those days, so that when you capture that excitement, you then show them how they can actually translate that excitement into a future career. So our team is incredibly passionate about this. We're working with European Space Agency and Tim Peake, because I think he kind of carries the load of space outreach at the minute. So really using launch to inspire local children. Our goal is to get into every single school before that first launch, and I think we're almost there already. We are inundated with schools. We do live webinars into the rocket factory out in California. They could speak to the rocket engineers. We're having a new education facility planned up on site. We're doing exhibits throughout Cornwall this summer. We have work booklets. We've got a mascot now that the kids designed. We're really going for it with this, because we actually think this is probably one of the biggest opportunities out of all of this, is to really inspire that next generation. But all of that, we feel we need to kind of capture that with a bit of infrastructure. So when I showed you the picture of what Virgin actually need and those lorries, we want to go one step further than that. We want to be able to, when Virgin are not here, because the first few years, it might only be a couple times a year, what else can we be doing? What else can we attract? So using Virgin in a way as a magnet to draw, because they're, such a powerful brand, and what they're doing, their activities is really exciting. So we have loads of businesses that already want to work alongside. So what we're doing is actually building a facility. So groundbreaking is due around G7 time, and we're going to actually look at creating a satellite integration facility where satellites will come in, they'll be integrated into the rockets to go off to space. And when there aren't rockets there, we're going to have academia, SMEs, other companies in doing R&D and collaboration around satellite technology, integration techniques, but also the application side. And we all are trying to theme this under environmental intelligence as well. So how are we looking at the technologies we need to launch more efficiently, more responsibly, but also what are the satellites going on to do, and how do we really harness the satellite technology that we have coming through Cornwall to actually focus on improving life on Earth and helping fight climate change. So this new facility will be finished by the end of the year. We're so excited for it, because we have probably about 6 or 7 other businesses besides Virgin now that are signed up to use it. So when Virgin are not here, it's going to be still a kind of hustle and bustle of space tech going on in Cornwall at an airport. So it's really I think by getting this piece of facility and infrastructure is a really huge moment, because it will just kind of stick all of this in one place, and we can grow the cluster from here. And that's what's going to capture all those further jobs and economic growth, and all the other business opportunities is from this facility. So my final slide is just what's next. I've mentioned a few times we have G7 coming here in a few weeks, and we're a bit of a poster child, I would say, for what's going on in Cornwall and the UK in kind of new tech and innovative technologies. So it's really for us about kind of challenging outdated perceptions of Cornwall, but also showing how we're launching and how we would hope other countries will start to look at launch, and that it's not just a secretive, behind fences, kind of dirty industry anymore. We're doing it open, transparently, and we really want to challenge the rest of the G7 when they are looking at launch in the future to start to consider that. So a lot of stuff going on at G7. I think I'm supposed to be in 4 places on the same day, so that'll be fun. So yeah, really using our voice there about kind of communicating the story, the wider story of launch. And then Virgin themselves, that top picture there is their further launches they have planned out in California. So they've done that first one in January. Their second one they've just announced last week will be this summer. And yeah, just supporting them and really capturing all the data and information that they have coming back from those launches so we can make our launches more efficient out here. So working with their engineering teams is going to be great as well. The more they get to launch out in California, then they'll kind of turn their attentions to us. And then finally, I think I may have touched on it, but we are waiting. I said we could launch tomorrow if we wanted. The one thing we're really needing is this, basically a piece of paperwork, which is allowing us to launch legally in the UK, because we've never launched here before. So there's something called the spaceflight regulations that are going through Parliament this summer. And once they pass, so it's actually the secondary legislation. Once that passes, we are then invited to apply for a spaceport license, which will be a series of manuals, safety regulations, environmental effects regulations that we will have to tick all the boxes in that, us and Virgin, and apply for our spaceport license before we're given the rubber stamp to launch. So that's what we'll be waiting for. The bills that I just talked about and this piece of legislation are the two things by the end of the year we should have to get us to launch. And as soon as those come through, we'll be launching next year. So for the first time ever, which is very exciting. So hopefully I didn't talk too fast. I get very excited about it. But really just happy to take any questions you might have or go into a bit more detail if there's anything. But I think that is it.
Great. Thank you very much, Melissa. Yes, you've stopped sharing your screen. Thank you very much. That's good. Now, one thing that I wanted to ask you is the difference between any other aircraft flight and a space launch flight. Now, you said that spaceports have been chosen to be near the sea, and they're all chosen in comparatively underpopulated areas. Perhaps Prestwick isn't, but nevertheless, even the horizontal launch ones were near the sea. Why is that? Why can't they be launched from Heathrow, for example, if there were capacity there?
I think it's just risk management at the end of the day. I think maybe one day in the future where things have proven themselves a lot, but it's still, it's still quite new technology, a lot of this. So to put a rocket on, a really large rocket and shoot it off at the end of the runway on an aircraft fully laden above a bunch of residential buildup, I just don't think the government's ready to take that risk. So I think shooting it off over the sea first, seeing how that goes for the next few years, will be the way that the government wants to take it, and I think that's fair enough. And also, because it is a rocket, to have clear airspace as much as it can on in transit to where its launch location is really important as well. So, working with the Civil Aviation Authority to identify exactly where that drop zone will be and what that looks like in it, and that there's no other users in that area at the time. I think over the next few years, it's just going to be proving all of this work seamlessly before they start to look at kind of bringing it inland anywhere for a horizontal launch anyways. Vertical, I guess, traditionally for the same reason, because a lot of the first stages of the rocket drop into the sea. That's the main reason vertically.
Could you outline some of the concerns that the locals have? I mean, okay, where I live, when planes are in full flow, there's the later versions of not 747s, because those are being phased out, but the Skyliners or whatever, those are right overhead at 7,000 feet every few minutes, and we all wish they could go away. But of course, everyone wants to go on holiday, and we don't say that when we're getting in one to go on holiday somewhere. So it's a mixed blessing, isn't it? What are the local concerns?
That actually hasn't been, I think, because there's not a lot of people that live around the airport. It's always been a busy airport, even in the military days. We have search and rescue, so we've got Bristows, they're very noisy. We've got the air ambulance. It's an active airport. We're only adding probably a couple of launches a year, a couple of takeoff and landings a year to that. It's actually not. That hasn't been, I don't think we've had any negativity around that from the locals. It's been around things like the council spending money on it in times where they felt maybe they could spend money on other things. but this is an investment. It's revenue generating by the 5th year. So it's actually not even, we're not taking money from social services, for instance. This is prudential borrowing. So that was a concern. The environmental one has been a long ongoing one, which I touched on there, but a lot of that was just a lot of misunderstanding of exactly what we were doing, that we thought we were maybe a heavy lift rocket. There's always concerns around Richard Branson. It tends to come up more than anything else, and his intentions in Cornwall. But I think because Virgin's coming to access their customer base, and really the benefits going to come to Cornwall from the growth of the jobs and all the things that I've talked about, I think that's kind of gone to the wayside because they've seen, actually we are now doing what we said we were going to do. We're employing people and stuff's happening up on site now. I think originally people just didn't believe it. And Cornwall has a lot of projects, a few white elephants in the past, a lot of European funding that's maybe gone to things that they didn't quite believe in. So I think there's a bit of a history of some of these really kind of, at first on the surface, bizarre looking projects. So I think the first quite a few years, we got laughed at, or we got like, oh, this will never happen. But now we're here. And people are like, again, seeing that we're actually doing something, and it is actually due to happen. And Virgin launching in California in January was a huge step in that direction, that the technology works. So a lot of the kind of negativity, if there's always been more positivity than negativity, but any of the negative is definitely not what it used to be. Because we've been open to having those conversations as a team. We're very open, and we'll go and sit and have difficult conversations at any point in time if we need to. So we're not backing away from anything. So I think a lot of that hopefully is coming through now to the local community.
Okay, good. Now, anybody got any questions? Let's throw it open. Yeah, Michael, there, I can see you've got you're waving away. Go ahead. You're muted. Still muted. There you go. No, still muted.
Maybe can people unmute?
No, I can't. You're not coming off mute. While you figure out how to unmute yourself, has anybody else got a question here? Can you just wave at the screen? You've got a question? Yeah, Martin, go ahead. You can unmute. You should be able to unmute. I allow people to do so.
Yeah.
Let me try it again. Let me see.
I think if you unmute all.
Yeah, I'll unmute her because it. Ask all to unmute. Well, you can all unmute if you want, but
right.
Yeah. Okay, Martin,
Can you
go
hear me?
ahead.
Okay. What I want to know is how the satellites get to Newquay. Is it by road or by sea? And is the harbour there big enough to take satellites? Does that need to be expanded?
No, at the minute, from the UK, most of them will come by road. But we're interested to see what will happen from Europe. Obviously, now we started this project long before Brexit was even even a thought. So now post Brexit, I know UK Space Agency are working really hard on what that might look like. So we'll wait and see. But Falmouth Port, yeah, we can handle quite a bit. If not, Southampton and down is probably the other option.
Cornwall isn't the most accessible place.
Mm-hmm. Sorry?
The roads are up to it, are they?
Exactly.
In that area?
Yeah, so we're building the new facilities, a brand new access road, right off an A road, which links straight to the A30. So yeah.
Okay.
It's not the normal road to the terminal.
There will be a new major road to the airport, in other words.
It's already
from the A30.
there. Yeah, it's been there for a while now, yeah.
Okay.
And is the intention just to launch British satellites, or is there scope to the satellites made elsewhere in the world to be launched?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, accessibility of the location will benefit the UK. And the whole point of creating Launch was to capture that market in the UK for the UK. But it's not to say that, like it's a European hub. So we'll hopefully have satellites from Europe and anywhere else that we see fit. But going into that kind of ethical framework, if there's a country maybe that isn't quite fitting the filters that we'd like to see coming out of Cornwall, then it might look to be turned away in the future. I don't know, but Yeah, so not just that, and probably also to mention that Virgin they're our anchor tenant, but we'll be looking to launch with other companies in the future as well. So hopefully you'll hear a little bit more about that over the coming months. We'll hopefully have the next operator.
Okay, thank you.
I've had a complaint from Chris Rowland that I'm still not allowing participants to unmute. I have unticked every option I can, including allow participants to unmute themselves and ask all to unmute. And some people obviously have. Paul Skidmore, you're muted. Can you unmute?
Chris could always chat. He could use chat to convey a question.
No, but I'm going to mute everyone and then unmute. Let's see if that works. Mute all. Now, and then allow participants to unmute themselves. Let's see if that works.
Yeah.
Can you do it now? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
that works.
Okay. Over to Michael. Michael, you had a question there.
Well, you'd asked me.
Melissa, on your first slide, you also showed a number of other horizontal launch options in Scotland. So what would give Cornwall the edge over the likes of Prestwick and some of these other horizontal launch facilities in Scotland?
Oh, Melissa, you're on mute. You're muted. The joys of Zoom.
There we go. Yeah, the only one that's still going out of all those 8 sites in most of them are actually vertical. So Sutherland's the official vertical launch site in Scotland, with Shetland kind of following as well. Prestwick itself is still in the mix as a horizontal launch site. All those sites have different offers. Sutherland as vertical and us as horizontal are their 2 officially funded UK Space Agency locations, but that the other ones are likely to follow in the future. Again, there'll be first movers to get to launch, and we're not competing against each other. We're actually competing against other commercial spaceports in Europe. So we need to kind of capture this for the UK first, and we're likely to be the first 2 to do that. But other sites will probably come as maybe for experimental space technologies. So the likes of Lambetta in Wales, for instance, is looking at balloon technology. And we're looking at, other things at Prestwick. Cornwall was just because we partnered with Virgin and we suited them, they suited us. So that's why we kind of moved quite quickly. And like I said, we had something already ready to go. And so we were able to move quickly and quite cost effectively. The Virgin system can go to different orbits as well. So that's a flexibility in that system. We could do polar orbit. We could also do equatorial orbit from Cornwall. So it opens up a few more options that way as well.
If you do equatorial orbit, does that mean the plane has to fly down to farther south?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Paul Skidmore, you had a question.
Yeah. Hello. Fantastic talk. Thank you very much indeed. I was just interested in the kinds of satellite applications that you might be launching. You've already mentioned ones involved in environmental monitoring, but could you give an outline of the range of applications? And would you have any capacity to refuse the launching of certain types of satellites?
Yeah, so exactly what I was saying as our ethical framework when we're going through, and is the council own the site. It's a gateway to space, and what we're launching is going to be very important in that process as a public owned asset. So that is something that's definitely for the politicians is a decision that they need to make. And in regards to satellite applications, there's a great website you can go on. Satellite Catapult is out of Harwell, and they do lots of kind of innovative technologies with satellites. But it's endless. You've got countries in Africa, for instance, and places that will never have traditional fiber connectivity, and they're using, satellites for getting communications into their schools. So there's great examples of that. We're looking at actually launching a community satellite for Cornwall, which is going to be a CubeSat that does ocean color. It's an optic satellite that will monitor the coastal areas of Cornwall to look at where pollution is, but also look at potentially seagrass and kelp forests to monitor exactly where the future of that might be. So if we want to plant a kelp forest for carbon sequestration in the future. So actually localizing, using space for local issues as well is something quite interesting. During the pandemic, they were monitoring a lot. There's a website you can go on and look at what was happening for COVID from space. We have a company down in Cornwall that is working with the United Nations, and they use satellite imagery to look at the growth of refugee camps, from financial and fintech companies to cancer research. We work with a company that's putting cancer research up into microgravity and doing experiments that would have taken 6 months on Earth in 24 hours. They're getting results in microgravity. So it's, you could go really on and on, but yeah, you can have a look online. If you just Google satellite applications, it's incredible. University of Exeter is tracking sea turtles and their migration patterns from space, and it's poaching, everything. It's pretty much endless.
Yeah, the essential focus of my question was, would the spaceport have a censoring capacity with regard to certain launches, or would these decisions always be made at a governmental level?
I'd say, we are government. Spaceport Cornwall is Cornwall Council owned, but our operator is Virgin Orbit, and Virgin Orbit are the ones that are going to be actually getting the customer on their rocket. They have their own policies of what they're putting on the rocket. And the first few satellites that they've launched, you can see exactly what they're up to in space and the payloads and what those CubeSats are up to. So they're quite open and transparent about that as well. So, I think space, and it has been 100% very secret. And the fact that you can now start to see what people are launching is a move in the right direction, but it will take time to get there, definitely. But that's something that we're trying to at least have those conversations now.
Thank you.
Looking at Chris Rowland's picture there, he's got a little plane in the background, which is presumably his own. And he asks, will he still be welcome at Newquay in his own little aircraft?
Of course. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like it's about integrating, but you might land and you might see, a space launch about to happen. So that's quite exciting.
Well,
but yeah,
that would be nice.
Nothing will change, Chris. You'll still be able to land your aircraft. Yeah, definitely.
I don't need most of your facilities. I need about 20% of your runway, and none of the instrument stuff.
Yeah, but that's not changing. We're staying open. All the business as usual.
Yeah, just economical landing fees and decent burgers. Otherwise, because your competitor for me is Payload.
Yes, yeah, down the road from where I live, actually. So.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Why the space agency needs so many different spaceports if it's gonna be just launch twice a year? Why they need in different parts of the world? They can just have one in USA and send everything from there, because you can send in any place from one spaceport. Now you don't need different location in the globe.
Yes. Do you mean the UK Space Agency or Virgin? Because UK Space Agency obviously want to capture opportunities throughout different parts of the UK by developing spaceports. So we'll do something very different from what they're doing up in Shetland. We're able to offer something different, and Sutherland's offering something different. So it's a different kind of market. Virgin are having a network of spaceports because they're basically providing a red carpet service for their customers to space. So it's rather than the customers come to them out in California. So all those satellites, as I said before, shipping overseas, they're actually coming to Europe to be closer to where the market is. It's closer. So they'll have probably about 5 or 6 around the world to just access all those different customer bases.
Okay, I understand. Instead going all the way to America, they're gonna send from here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I know Melissa is saying just to get away at 9, and it's that now. So One last question from me, and that is, what is the difference between vertical launch and horizontal launch in terms of payload?
Again, it just depends on the rocket. So we're pretty restricted in that kind of 300 to 500 kilograms of what we can carry on the Virgin system. But on the heavy lift rockets, they can do much bigger than that. So that's where they tend to see, what you see from SpaceX and what you'll potentially see up in Scotland. It's size of what they can launch. We're only looking at small satellite launches down here in Cornwall, whereas they're probably looking at some bigger things up in Scotland.
So there you have it. That's what's in line for Cornwall. Next time you go down to Cornwall on holiday, maybe you'll be able to watch a space launch. Won't that be amazing? Although I guess watching a 747 take off isn't all that exciting, really, compared with being at Cape Canaveral.
Robin, can I just
even notice? Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Can I just ask a quick question? Is there any sort of visitor centre there?
There will be, yes, towards the end of this year, early next year.
You can't stop the Cornish having a visitor attraction, can you?
No, it's not a visitor center. It's more of our education outreach facility, and that's just part one of what we're hoping will be a much bigger, better one in the future. But we're starting as the entire project, will grow as it grows.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Melissa. That was really interesting, and I'm sure we will hear a lot more about this in the future, and look forward to maybe seeing you again sometime and telling us how successful it's all been. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And
thank you.
Thank you.
A round of applause for you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Melissa's got to get away, so thank you.
Childcare duties. Thank you. Bye.
Now we will turn over to, thank you. Bye, Melissa. And now we'll turn over to David, who is I'm going to mute all and then unmute David so that we don't get any, let's find David, asked to unmute. There he goes. So, okay, David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Robin. So the observations and the sky notes for this month, that you should be able to see that heading now. Yep. WOLAS observations. We seem to have had quite a lot of clear sky. I don't know about you, but I've had the impression of a lot of clear nights in April, and it was a very dry month. Statistically, we had some rain right at the end of April, or maybe at the beginning of May, but it wasn't, I believe, one of the driest months ever recorded, one of the driest Aprils ever recorded. So I'll start from the sun and work outwards because the sun has been showing some activity, and Kwong-man has been on the case, and he's taken this lovely image on which day is that? That is the 23rd of April. And he's become quite an expert at processing these, and he's provided me with a lot of details of what he's done. He's captured it with fire capture. He's applied a flat frame. He's then processed it with SER player. This won't be of much interest to you if you don't do this kind of imaging. He's processed it with SER player, and then with Auto Stitch 64. He's extracted 18 frames for a combination. He's used Photoshop and another program called ImageJ to remove the Newton's rings, which I'll come on to. And then another program called IMPPG for deconvolution and unsharp masking, and Photoshop for color and adding text and final adjustments. So that just gives you the impression of how many stages there are in producing an image like this, and how many different apps people often employ. And when I showed him one of my solar images, I've taken some this month, and I get this is one of my images, which was 23rd of April. And you can see quite a bit of detail there with some filaments there and a prominence on the limb. But I also get these vertical bands, which are called Newton's rings, which are an artificial thing in the telescope system. They're due to interference between different layers of glass, which you get when you've got a very specific narrow band of frequency. And Kwong has been working on a method of removing these. And so I sent my image to him, and he managed to virtually remove these. And this is the version that he did. And so there it's almost free of these Newton's rings, whereas before it had these Newton's rings on it. And that's done with a program called ImageJ. And he's become an expert on doing this. So thanks very much, Kwong, for that. And this image, I've colorized it here and done a bit more processing. So that's April the 23rd. That's taken with a dedicated solar telescope, dedicated hydrogen alpha telescope made by Lunt, and a chameleon camera, which is actually a camera that I got from Martin Lewis, who was using it for a completely different purpose before, using it for Venus, but it was surplus his requirements. So thanks very much for that, Martin, as well. So that's processing. Two people have processed that image. And here's another one from May the 6th, a little bit less activity on here. You can see an active area on the right-hand side of the image, and the shape of the clouds in the shape of the magnetic fields there, and a few filaments at the top of the screen, those darker shadowy things. Here's the moon. That's a very young moon, which I took with the small, not with the telescope at all, with a 300mm telephoto lens. In April, you can get the very young moon because you get a steep angle between the ecliptic and the horizon at dusk from our latitude. So you can get a 2day to 3 day old moon. So there it is with Earthshine. And that's taken with an ordinary DSLR camera, very old one, in fact, a EOS 350D camera. And I'll show you a few more of my lunar images. Here's the moon waxing on April the 19th, more or less a first quarter moon. Lots of famous craters on the terminator there, the Ptolemaeus chain, Ptolemaeus, Alphonsus, and Arzachel. And that's taken with a 100mm refractor. And also an infrared filter. And this one, it was taken with a slightly bigger telescope with a 5-inch Celestron SCT. And here you can see Clavius on the terminator, very large, famous crater, about 120 miles in diameter. And another large crater also further up the terminator, Delandre, more or less in the middle of that image. And again, with the same telescope, this is the 5-inch Celestron with a monochrome camera and a red filter, hydrogen alpha wideband filter. And there you can see the mountains, the Montes Apenninus fringing the Mare Imbrium, and also the Montes Alpes, the Lunar Alps with Plato, and that cut through the mountains known as the Alpine Valley. So that's all done with a 5-inch telescope. And we had a so-called super moon, which was the full moon, which was supposed to be super. In other words, it was quite big. And so I had to take a picture of that. And that's a color picture taken with the Canon 350D camera with the saturation exaggerated to show the different colors of the Maria. And you can see that the Mare Tranquillitatis is rather bluer than some of the other Maria. And also the bright crater on the upper left, that's Aristarchus, that's quite blue. The younger features tend to be blue. That's again taken with the 5-inch Celestron. I wanted to get it exactly at the moment of full moon. So that was taken at 2:45 GMT, which is 2:45 BST. And then I found the moon was already sinking into the hedge as seen by that telescope. So I had to start cutting down the hedge in the middle of the night. So my neighbors may well wonder what on earth is going on. why I am doing gardening at that time, but that is usually the reason. Martin Lewis has also been imaging the moon, and here's a lovely shot of Plato, famous dark floored crater with one or two smaller craters, which are too small really to see most of the time, but they're captured in this image, taken obviously in good seeing with his 444 millimeter Dobsonian. So that's crater, that's Plato in the and the lunar Alps surrounding it. Interesting little fissures and valleys in those Alps there as well. And Martin, of course, is a world leading expert on imaging the planets, such as Mars, which has got very small, only about 5 seconds diameter. And that was the 13th of April, taken with a color camera, ASR 224 MC camera, and the 18-inch Dobsonian, which he built himself, fossil light as it is known. Here's another one, 20th of April, still getting smaller. And here's a further view, 6th of May, you can see the Syrtis Major there, the V-shaped dark area, and the bright Hellas plain above it, and the clouds, they probably are, over the south polar regions in the lower part of the image. Well, last month we had a talk about remote imaging and how you can take images with telescopes far from where you are in good skies over the internet and then process them yourself. So taking inspiration from this, Douglas Adams has sent me this, which what he's done is he's got a free image download from a site called Astro Backyard, and they've got an image processing challenge, and he's processed it. And on the left hand side you can see the unprocessed image. The right hand side is partially processed, and then his final version is here. This is the Sol Nebula, it's called, also known as Sharpless 2/199. It's in Cassiopeia. It's a hydrogen alpha emission region. And this is the fully processed version, processed in Photoshop by Douglas, of this image, which was taken by somebody else. I don't know what telescope it was originally taken with. It seems to be, the Americans have given all these nebulae these curious names. This one is the Sol Nebula, and there's another one nearby called the Heart Nebula. So the pairing is sometimes shown in images as the Heart and Sol Nebula. But this one looks a bit like a baby or a fetus in the womb. So it just shows you how different the original image is. That on the left-hand side, that's the original data displayed in its raw form. That shows how an astronomical image taken in a dark sky, even a long exposure, is almost totally black in reality. And you have to extract the data right at the bottom end of the sensitivity of the equipment and amplify it in such a way as to not over amplify the noise. And you can get a tremendous result like that. So well done, Douglas. Here's another nebula. This is a much smaller nebula, and this actually was taken locally by Robin from his house, Flackwell Heath. This is the Cat's Eye Nebula, a planetary nebula, NGC 6543, and this was taken with Robin's Meade LX90 200 millimeters, so it's an 8-inch telescope, and a Sony A7S camera. So that's an uncooled camera. It's not a specialized astronomical camera. It's a general camera, general purpose. And he's taken 5 1-second exposures at the astonishingly high ISO of 25600. As my old Canon camera, I typically use at 800 ISO, but modern cameras go up to these really high numbers. And yes, the Cat's Eye Nebula is emitting in oxygen 3 primarily, which gives us this blue or greenish color, which is typical of planetary nebulae. And it's a beautiful thing. And Robin also observed it visually with his 300mm Dobsonian, he tells me, with a magnification of 300 times. It's in a high northern constellation in Draco near the pole, so it's visible for most of the year. It's well placed at this time of year. At this time of year, of course, we're running short of dark sky, and from mid-May into June and July, there's really no proper dark sky. So the best you can do is really about half an hour either side of 1 a.m. After that, then the summer sky starts coming back, and constellations like Cygnus and Lyra. But I thought I'd get in early with Cygnus and image something in Cygnus. And here is my attempt at narrowband imaging. This is the Crescent Nebula, which is an object I haven't imaged before, actually. Quite a popular object to image. In Cygnus, which is still quite low at this time of year. And I took this over quite a lot of nights, about 5 nights, but most of them were either too light polluted or misty or too many satellites going through. So in the end, there's not that much exposure in it. There's 55 minutes of hydrogen alpha exposure, 30 minutes of oxygen 2 exposure, and 20 minutes of S3 exposure, and 30 minutes of S3 and S2, and 20 minutes luminance. So I suppose that totals less than 2 hours exposure I got out of loads of nights. But some of the nights I just totally threw away the data because the sky wasn't transparent enough. So that's the kind of thing you get. It's for the time you spend on it, you often throw away most of what you acquire. I sometimes do. That was taken with a small telescope, 66mm telescope, and a cool CCD camera, but a very old one called the Artemis 285. I've had that for about 15 years, I think. I have to keep a computer that runs Windows XP because it won't work on any more modern computer. So that's the narrowband image of the Crescent Nebula, which is some sort of remnant. I forget, I'm not sure what it is actually. I have to look it up. It could be a remnant of some sort of stellar explosion, it looks like to me. So I'll now mention what's coming up. The moon is new tomorrow. May the 19th, first quarter, it'll be a nice high first quarter moon. Well, the crescent moon will be high as well, so it'd be a good month to look at the crescent moon. May the 26th, full. There is a lunar eclipse, but unfortunately it occurs in the daytime, so you won't see it from the UK. You would have to be on the other side of the world. You'd have to be in the Pacific region to see that total lunar eclipse. June 2nd, last quarter. And the next new moon, as usual, the new moon after a full moon, there is a solar eclipse, and this time it is an annular eclipse, and it's partial from the UK. To see the actual annular eclipse, which is where the moon is exactly in front of the sun, and you get a ring of light round the moon because the moon is relatively far away on this occasion, and it doesn't completely obscure the bright photosphere of the sun, so you get an annular or ring type eclipse. To see that, you would have to be in the Arctic or in Canada. It goes through Quebec and some quite populous areas of Canada. From London, it will be 20% eclipse, and it will start at 10 BST, and it will maximum is 11, about 11:15 BST, and it goes on till about 12:30. So quite a good partial eclipse that morning, the morning of the 10th of June. So have a look out for that. Now remember, to look at the sun, you have to take precautions, the correct precautions, of course. and you have to have the proper filter on your telescope or the proper eclipse glasses to view the sun with the naked eye, or the proper filters to take pictures. But I'd be very pleased to have your observations, or you could, of course, you could always project the solar image with a telescope or with binoculars. Anyway, I'd be very pleased to see if people manage to observe that eclipse, be the first partial eclipse we've had for quite a few years, visible from here. There's no meteors apart from in the daytime. I really only mention this because we do have a radio astronomer in WOLAS, David Talaber, so he might be interested that there's some daytime showers. There's the daytime Aretids and the daytime Delta Perseids, and they both have their maximum in early June. They overlap, and they are the richest of the daytime showers. So that might be of interest to our resident radio astronomer. But there's no nighttime, no significant nighttime showers at this time of year. So what are the planets doing? Well, quite a few of them are in the western sky at dusk. And here's the view on the 15th of May, about half an hour after sunset, 21 BST. And you'll see that Mercury and Venus are visible. And Mercury moves very fast, of course. You only see it for a few weeks, for a couple of weeks. Its highest altitude is on 16th of May, when it is 16 degrees high at sunset. So if you have a good western or west-northwest horizon, you may well be able to spot Mercury bright, its magnitude 0, and with a telescope it will have a 40% phase. Venus will be more difficult because lower, but Venus is brighter. Then a bit higher in the sky, you've got Mars, and the moon joins it quite close on the 15th of May. Mars is now 24 degrees high at dusk. It's much faded compared to its maximum. It's only mag 1.7, only 4 seconds in diameter. So getting hard to make out any detail with a telescope. So Mars is leaving us, gradually leaving us, and we won't have another opposition of Mars until 2022. In the morning sky, we have the other planets, the outer planets coming back. We have Jupiter and Saturn. This map also marks Pluto and Neptune. You won't see them because the sky will be too bright at this time. This is 4:30 on the 4:30 this morning. But at that time, you'll see Jupiter quite clearly, very bright, magnitude -2.3, 12 degrees high, and Saturn, similar altitude, but much fainter, and Saturn is further to the west. So you may be able to pick those up if you're up at that time. And if you're, yes, and if you're, well, if you're up at any time, really, you might be able to spot a nova. We've got quite a good nova. I don't often show you light curves. Here's a light curve, and this light curve is of Nova Cassiopeia. And this object, this outburst, well, this was discovered on March the 18th, and it's been a binocular object since then. And it's been most of the time about magnitude 7.5, but over the last few days is brightened by 2 magnitudes, up to brighter than 5. And tonight it could be brighter, so we need to keep an eye on it. It's about magnitude 5.3 in the latest visual estimates, which makes it the brightest nova seen from the UK since Nova Delphinis in 2013. And it's in a photogenic region of the sky close to the Bubble Nebula, NGC 7635, and the cluster M52. The nova is called V1405 CAS now, is its official designation. It's not easy, however, because the sky is getting too bright now. As I said, there isn't enough dark sky, and it's going to be, well, about midnight, when you're going to get the darker sky, this object is going to be quite low. But Robin managed to capture it. And on a couple of occasions, the left-hand image is 20th of March and the right-hand image is 8th of May. And he circled the nova there in the lower part of the image, lower right, and you can see it's got significantly brighter. In that image is also the open cluster Messier 52. If you're up early in the morning, you could also look out, particularly towards the end of this month, for Noctilucent Clouds. In recent years, we've had the Noctilucent Clouds becoming visible from the London area from about mid-May and really peaking in early June. And last year, we had a spectacular display on June the 6th, which I observed. And here's my picture of Stag Lane in Edgware at 2:35 GMT. So that is 3:30 in the morning last year, in June the 6th. And on that occasion, the sky was absolutely covered with this filigree of blue-white cloud, which is not ordinary cloud. This is right on the boundary of space. And this is a peculiar phenomenon that you only see about 2 hours after sunset or 2 hours before sunrise, and you see it in the summer months. And they have becoming more and more prominent in the last few years. So keep a lookout for those. And if you can snap some of them, then send the images to me. So that's all for this month. It seems to be clear again. So it's clear night, so I will not detain you longer. So get out there and observe the nova and whatever else you can find.
Thank you very much, David. If you'd like to stop sharing the screen, we can see the rest of us. That's it. Hi, great. Okay. Yes, I just had a look at the AAVSO estimates of Nova Cas, and as you said, it is still up there, magnitude 5.3. I didn't notice when the last observation was. Give me a second and I'll tell you. But it was obviously still quite bright, and I've no doubt that it will be bright enough to see even with the naked eye if you're in good conditions. On the May the 10th, 0.38 is what they give at magnitude 5.2. So actually we're later in the day now, so maybe there will be some more observations of it. And it looks as if it was leveling off at about 5.2, 5.3. So get out there and have a look for that nova. Who knows when there'll be another one along. Okay. Any questions for David? Anything that anyone has to talk about? Let me have a look, see if anyone's waving their hands. No, I can't see anybody. Okay. Well, with that, the meeting over. Thank you to Melissa, who's had to go, and also to David. Our speaker next month is Bob Misen, talking about light pollution. He's calling it, let me see, what was the talk? Something like The Night, an Unknown Country, something of some of the latest developments in trying to combat light pollution. So that's next month. We have also probably an AGM. We have yet to decide how to run the AGM. Traditionally, and according to the Constitution, it should be held in June, but we are yet to decide. We'll be having a committee meeting in the next week or two to decide what is the best way to run this. So we will let you know in due course. Okay. Now,
we could ask people whether they would like to come to a real meeting when we're allowed to have them.
Yes, that's a good point. I know there's a method of doing a poll on Zoom. I've never tried doing it. I can't see the option here. So the earliest we are likely to be able to hold a live meeting is next September. And I know that is it possible to put up your hand? There is usually a put up your hand option on the screen, but if not, it'd be useful to know from people if they would like to have a live meeting in September. Paul Skidmore has found the button. A few hands appearing. We think that we will. A lot of people haven't indicated one way or the other.
It's under reactions is the mechanism for mechanically raising.
Oh yes, reactions. Okay. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see reactions, and you can
put an ice cream cone on there if you like.
Yeah. Well, people are humming and hawing. Maybe not so sure, but we may be. Chris Rowland said we're happy with the Zoom AGM. So we will see. It's useful to gauge opinion. If anyone's got viewpoints, then send me an email. You can use the newsletter at wolas.org.uk address if you want. Doesn't matter how you do it. Let us know what your feelings are about having a live meeting in September, because that is the earliest we're likely to be able to do it. We obviously have no idea what the mood in the country will be like in September, what people are going to be feeling. Things are opening up, but at the same time, by then, who knows about the third wave? No one can really tell. But we certainly don't want to close things down unless we have to. Okay, I will leave the airwaves open if people want to chat, and you're welcome to do so. I may go out and start observing myself because I can see it's clear. So if I disappear, then you're still welcome to carry on chatting for as long as you like. So with that, the meeting is over. I shall stop the recording, and I shall stop the live on YouTube, because I don't think we really need the